Little boy, son of millionaire, saves plane and 333 people from falling. Nobody on Flight 747 could have imagined that their lives would be saved by an 8-year-old boy. But that's exactly what happened on that Tuesday afternoon when everything went catastrophically wrong at 35,000 feet. While the wealthy passengers sipped champagne in first class, little Marcus sat quietly in seat 12A, clutching his backpack and staring out the window. His father, billionaire tech mogul Richard Thompson, was too busy on conference calls to pay attention to his son. The Boeing 767 was carrying 333 souls from Seattle to Miami, and not a single one knew they had less than 40 minutes before disaster struck. Marcus pressed his small hand against the cold airplane window, watching the clouds drift by like cotton candy. He had always loved flying, ever since his first trip when he was just 4 years old. There was something magical about being suspended between earth and sky, caught in that space where anything seemed possible. His tablet lay forgotten on the tray table. Some boring educational game his father had downloaded still paused on the screen. Even at 8 years old, Marcus was expected to be preparing for the empire he would someday inherit. The flight had been smooth so far, almost boringly routine for the experienced crew. Captain Jennifer Walsh, a 22-year veteran with over 15,000 flight hours, sat in the cockpit reviewing weather reports with her co-pilot, Daniel Martinez. "Weather looks clear all the way to Miami," Daniel commented, adjusting his headset. Jennifer nodded, but something in her gut felt slightly off, that inexplicable pilot's intuition that comes from decades of experience. She dismissed it as fatigue, but made a mental note to stay extra alert anyway. In first class, Richard Thompson finally ended his conference call and glanced at his expensive watch with mild irritation. At 42 years old, he had built Thompson Technologies from a garage startup into a $15 billion empire through relentless focus and work ethic. His therapist had insisted he needed to spend quality time with Marcus, but Richard had spent most of their Seattle vacation on his phone anyway. He felt a twinge of guilt about that, but immediately pushed it aside with practiced efficiency. There was always something more urgent than the quiet boy who looked so much like his late wife. Marcus had gotten up to use the bathroom, carefully stepping over his sleeping nanny without waking her. On his way back to his seat, he noticed something odd near the emergency exit row. There was a small panel slightly ajar, revealing a tangle of wires and hydraulic lines behind it. His curiosity immediately sparked, as he recognized several components from the educational videos he loved watching. But something looked terribly wrong. One of the main hydraulic lines had a visible crack, and fluid was slowly dripping onto exposed electrical wiring below. Even at 8 years old, Marcus understood this was dangerous, and his heart started beating faster, with the sudden realization that nobody else had noticed this problem. Before Marcus could decide what to do, the plane suddenly shuddered violently, throwing him against the wall. The turbulence hit without warning, slamming passengers against their seatbelts and sending flight attendants scrambling for safety. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats immediately and fasten your seatbelts." Patricia Morrison's voice came over the intercom, calm but urgent. Marcus grabbed onto a seat back to steady himself, his small body still dangerously close to the damaged panel. In the cockpit, warning lights began flashing across the instrument panel like a deadly light show. "We've got a hydraulic failure in System A," Daniel called out, his voice tight with controlled alarm. "System B is showing fluctuations too." Jennifer's hands moved across the controls with practice speed, but the plane wasn't responding properly. "I'm getting limited control response on the ailerons. Something seriously wrong with the primary flight control system." Her pilot's intuition had been right, but now it was too late for prevention. The plane began to tilt dangerously to the left, and passengers started screaming as their drinks and belongings flew across the cabin. Richard Thompson finally looked up from his laptop when his whiskey glass shattered on the floor. The screaming around him penetrated his work-focused bubble, and his first thought was of Marcus. "Where's my son?" he shouted at the sleeping nanny who had just jerked awake in confusion. She looked at the empty seat next to her with dawning horror on her face. Richard unbuckled his seatbelt despite the warnings and stumbled into the aisle, panic rising in his chest. For the first time in 3 years, something mattered more than his business empire. Marcus clung to the seat as the plane lurched again, but his eyes remained fixed on the damaged panel. The crack in the hydraulic line had grown larger, and more fluid was leaking onto the electrical systems below. He understood what was happening because he had watched a documentary about the United Airlines Flight 232 crash. That plane had lost all hydraulic systems and crashed in Iowa, killing over 100 people. The memory of those images flashed through his mind, and he realized with crystal clarity that this plane was heading toward the same fate. Unless someone did something right now, everyone on board would die. I need to tell the pilots, Marcus whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the chaos around him. But how could an 8-year-old boy get to the cockpit during an emergency when the doors were locked and reinforced? He thought about his father, probably still working on his laptop without even noticing Marcus was gone. He thought about his mother, who had always told him that smart people use their knowledge to help others. "Be brave, sweetheart," she used to say. "Small people can do big things." Marcus took a deep breath, touched the airplane pendant around his neck, and made a decision that would determine whether 333 people lived or died. But getting anyone to listen to him would be the hardest challenge of his young life. Marcus started moving toward the front of the plane, fighting against the violent shaking that threatened to throw him down. Passengers were crying and praying all around him, their faces twisted with terror as the aircraft continued its sickening tilt. "Sit down, kid," a man shouted at him. But Marcus kept going, driven by a determination that surprised even himself. He reached the galley where Patricia Morrison was trying to secure loose items while maintaining her professional composure. "Excuse me, ma'am. I need to talk to the pilots," Marcus said, tugging on her uniform sleeve. Patricia looked down at the small boy with frustration and concern mixed on her face. "Sweetheart, you need to get back to your seat right now. This is a very dangerous situation." She tried to guide him back toward the cabin, but Marcus planted his feet firmly. "Please, I know what's wrong with the plane. There's a hydraulic leak onto the electrical system near row 14. His voice was steady and clear, despite his racing heart. Patricia paused, struck by the technical specificity of his words and the unusual calmness in his young eyes. "What did you say?" Patricia knelt down to his level, studying his face more carefully now. Marcus quickly explained what he had seen, using terms like hydraulic fluid contamination and electrical short circuit that no normal 8-year-old should know. If the hydraulic fluid keeps leaking, it'll cause a complete system failure. The pilots need to know exactly where the leak is so they can isolate it. Patricia's 18 years of experience told her that this child was either remarkably informed or incredibly lucky with his guess. Either way, she couldn't ignore the possibility that he might be right. The plane lurched again and she made her decision. "Come with me," Patricia said, grabbing Marcus's hand and leading him toward the cockpit door. She picked up the internal phone and called the flight deck, her voice urgent but controlled. "Captain Walsh, I have a passenger here with critical information about a possible hydraulic leak. I know protocol, but you need to hear this." There was a tense pause before Jennifer's voice came back. "We're kind of busy up here, Patricia. Can it wait?" Another alarm started blaring in the background. "No, ma'am. It absolutely cannot wait. This could save all our lives." The cockpit door lock buzzed and Patricia pulled it open, ushering Marcus into the cramped space filled with flashing lights and urgent beeping. Jennifer and Daniel both turned their heads briefly, shock registering on their faces at seeing a child in their cockpit during an emergency. "Captain, there's a cracked hydraulic line near row 14, and it's leaking fluid directly onto exposed electrical wiring," Marcus said quickly, his voice higher than he wanted, but steady. "The fluid is causing short circuits in the primary flight control system. If you don't isolate that section immediately, you'll lose all hydraulic pressure in both systems within 15 minutes. The cockpit went silent except for the alarms, and both pilots stared at the small boy who had just diagnosed their crisis with terrifying accuracy. Daniel's face went pale as he checked his instruments and realized the kid was absolutely right. "How do you know this?" Jennifer demanded, her hands still working the controls desperately. Marcus explained about the open panel, the crack he had seen, and the documentaries he had studied about hydraulic failures. United 232 crashed because they lost all 3 hydraulic systems. You still have time to isolate the damaged line and preserve System C. Daniel was already pulling up the hydraulic system schematics on his display, his fingers flying across the touchscreen. "He's right, Captain. If we can isolate the leak at Section 14, we might be able to maintain partial control through the backup system." Jennifer made a split-second decision that went against every protocol in the book. "Okay, kid, you're going to help us. Daniel, walk him through the isolation procedure." She turned to Patricia, who was still standing in the doorway. "Get back there and find that panel. We need visual confirmation of the exact location." Patricia nodded and disappeared back into the cabin. Marcus moved closer to the center console, his small hands gripping the edge as another violent shake rocked the aircraft. "The isolation valves are in the lower equipment bay, right?" he asked, his voice betraying his nervousness now. "That's right," Daniel confirmed, bringing up a detailed schematic. "But kid, that bay is only accessible from outside the cabin through a service hatch. We can't get down there during flight." Marcus felt his hope deflating, but then he remembered something from another video he had watched. "Wait, there's an emergency manual override in the aft service compartment. It's designed for exactly this situation." Jennifer and Daniel exchanged glances, both impressed and slightly unnerved by this child's knowledge. "He's right again," Daniel said, checking the technical manual. "But that compartment is tiny, maybe 2 feet high. An adult couldn't fit in there." Marcus understood what they weren't saying out loud. "I can fit, I'm small enough to get in there." The words came out before he fully processed what he was volunteering to do. Jennifer turned in her seat, really looking at Marcus for the first time. She saw a terrified little boy trying very hard to be brave, and she also saw their only chance of survival. "Son, that compartment is cramped, dark, and dangerous. If we hit more turbulence while you're in there, you could get seriously hurt." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat suddenly very dry. "But if I don't do it, we all die anyway, right?" Before anyone could respond, the plane dropped suddenly, falling almost 200 feet in seconds. Passengers screamed, and loose items flew through the cabin. Marcus was thrown against the cockpit wall, and Jennifer fought the controls with every ounce of strength she had. "We just lost another 10% hydraulic pressure," Daniel announced grimly. "We've got maybe 12 minutes before total system failure." Jennifer looked at Marcus, saw him picking himself up with determination still burning in his eyes, and made the hardest decision of her career. "Okay, kid, you're our best shot, but before we start, I need to know your name." Marcus stood up straight, touched his mother's pendant, and answered, "I'm Marcus Thompson, ma'am, and I'm ready to save this plane." Patricia returned to the cockpit, her face flushed from running. "I found the panel. The leak is exactly where he said it would be, and it's getting worse by the minute." She looked at Marcus with newfound respect mixed with concern. "You are absolutely right, sweetheart." Jennifer was already coordinating the plan, her voice switching into command mode. "Patricia, take Marcus to the aft service compartment and get him set up with a headset so we can communicate. Daniel, prepare the manual override sequence and be ready to talk him through every single step." The urgency in her voice made everyone move faster. Marcus followed Patricia through the chaotic cabin, past crying passengers and scattered debris. His father suddenly appeared in the aisle, his face white with fear and anger. "Marcus, where have you been? Get back to your seat right now." Richard grabbed his son's arm, but Patricia intervened firmly. "Sir, your son is helping us address a critical emergency. I need you to return to your seat immediately." Richard looked confused and furious. He's 8 years old. What could he possibly do? Marcus looked up at his father, and for once he didn't feel small or invisible. "I'm going to save us, Dad. Just trust me for once." Something in Marcus's voice made Richard release his grip, and Patricia quickly led the boy toward the back of the plane. They reached a small door near the rear galley that most passengers never even noticed. Patricia opened it, revealing a narrow crawl space barely illuminated by emergency lighting. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Marcus?" she asked gently, fitting a small headset over his ears. Marcus peered into the dark tunnel and felt his courage wavering. It looked terrifying, like something from a nightmare, cramped and claustrophobic and dangerous. But then he thought about his mother, about her last words to him in the hospital. "Small people can do big things," Marcus whispered, remembering her weak smile. He thought about all 333 people on this plane, all the families and dreams and futures that would end if he didn't act. He thought about his father, who barely noticed him most days, but was still his dad. "I'm sure," Marcus said more firmly, looking up at Patricia with determined eyes. "Tell me what I need to do." Patricia helped him put on a small headlamp and handed him a simple toolkit. "You're the bravest person I've ever met, kid. Now let's save some lives." Marcus crawled into the service compartment, and Patricia closed the hatch behind him, leaving him in the cramped darkness. The headlamp created a small circle of light that made the shadows seem even darker. He could feel the plane's vibrations through the metal floor, could hear the groaning of stressed systems all around him. "Marcus, can you hear me?" Daniel's voice came through the headset, calm and reassuring. "Yes, sir. I can hear you," Marcus responded, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Good. Now crawl forward about 6 feet until you see a yellow panel with red striping. That's where the manual override valves are located. Marcus started moving, his small body barely fitting in the tight space, and tried very hard not to think about what would happen if the plane went down while he was trapped in here. The bravest moments in life happen when we're absolutely terrified, but we do what needs to be done anyway, and Marcus was living that truth right now. Marcus crawled through the narrow passage, his headlamp beam bouncing off pipes and wiring as the plane shook around him. Every jolt sent his heart racing faster, and the confined space made it hard to breathe deeply. "I see the yellow panel," he reported, his voice trembling slightly despite his efforts to sound brave. The panel was covered in technical labels and warning stickers with dozens of valves and switches that all looked terrifyingly similar. "Okay, Marcus, you're doing great." Daniel's voice came through steadily. "Now look for valve number 47B. It should have a red handle on the left side of the panel." Marcus scanned the valves carefully, his small fingers tracing the numbers embossed on each one. 47A, 46C, 48B, where was 47B? The plane suddenly dropped again, and Marcus's head slammed against a low pipe, making him see stars. "Are you okay back there?" Patricia's worried voice cut through his headset. Marcus blinked away tears of pain and fear, touching the growing bump on his head. "I'm okay, just bumped my head, still looking for the valve." He refused to give up now, not when so many people were counting on him. "Found it," Marcus announced, his hand closing around the red handle of valve 47B. It was positioned awkwardly, requiring him to twist his body at an uncomfortable angle to reach it properly. "Perfect," Daniel responded, and Marcus could hear the relief in his voice. "Now listen carefully. You need to turn that handle counterclockwise exactly 3 full rotations, no more, no less. Can you do that?" Marcus gripped the handle with both hands and pulled, but it didn't budge. The valve was stuck, probably from years of never being used, and his 8-year-old arms weren't strong enough to move it. Panic started rising in his chest. "It won't turn," Marcus said, fighting to keep his voice from breaking. "It's stuck." In the cockpit, Jennifer and Daniel exchanged worried glances as another alarm started blaring. "We're down to 8 minutes of hydraulic pressure," Daniel announced grimly. Jennifer made an announcement to the cabin, her voice professional but urgent. "Ladies and gentlemen, please ensure your seatbelts are fastened tightly and prepare for emergency landing procedures." The cabin erupted in fresh screams and prayers. Richard Thompson sat frozen in his first-class seat, finally understanding that his son was somewhere in this dying plane, trying to save everyone, including his workaholic father, who had never had time for him. "Marcus, honey, I need you to try something." Patricia's voice came through gently. "Sometimes these old valves need a sharp impact to break them free. Can you hit the handle hard with something metal from your toolkit?" Marcus fumbled through the small bag and found a wrench. He positioned himself as well as he could in the cramped space and struck the valve handle as hard as his small arms could manage. Nothing happened. He hit it again, harder, feeling tears of frustration burning in his eyes. On the third strike, he felt something give way slightly. "I think it's moving," he shouted, gripping the handle again and pulling with all his strength. This time it turned, slowly at first, then more smoothly. Marcus counted out loud as he turned the valve, his voice shaking with effort and adrenaline. 1 full rotation, 2 full rotations, 3 full rotations. The handle clicked into place, and he felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him despite his exhaustion. "First valve isolated," Daniel confirmed, watching his instruments. "Hydraulic pressure in System A has stabilized, but we still need to close 2 more valves to fully contain the leak." Marcus's heart sank as he realized this was just the beginning, not the end of his mission. "Valve 52C is next," Daniel instructed. "It's about 3 feet to your right, near a bundle of blue wires." Marcus twisted his body and began crawling in that direction, his muscles already aching from the confined space. The plane hit another patch of severe turbulence, and he was thrown against the metal walls, his small body bouncing like a rag doll. "Marcus, talk to me," Patricia called out urgently when he didn't respond for several seconds. "I'm okay," he gasped, though his ribs hurt badly and his headlamp had nearly been knocked off his head. "Just got thrown around a bit." He reached the second valve and found it more easily this time, his eyes adjusting to reading the technical labels quickly. This handle was blue instead of red, and it required turning clockwise instead of counterclockwise. Marcus's hands were sweating inside the cramped space, and he could feel exhaustion creeping into his small body. Turning valve 52C now, he reported, gripping the handle. This one moved more easily, and he completed the 3 rotations without incident. Second valve isolated, Daniel confirmed. We're regaining some control authority. One more valve and we should be able to maintain stable flight. In the cabin, Richard Thompson had his face buried in his hands, overwhelmed with emotions he had suppressed for 3 years. He was remembering every missed soccer game, every bedtime story he had been too busy to read, every time he had chosen work over his son. The nanny sat next to him, quietly crying and praying. All around them, passengers who had been strangers minutes ago were holding hands and comforting each other. A young mother clutched her baby, whispering promises she hoped she could keep. An elderly couple sat with their foreheads pressed together, their hands intertwined after 52 years of marriage. Everyone understood they were minutes away from either salvation or catastrophe, and the fate of all of them rested in the hands of a small boy none of them had even noticed before. Last valve is 61A, Daniel said, his voice strained. But Marcus, this one is tricky. It's located above your head and you'll need to brace yourself while turning it, because there's nothing to hold on to up there. Marcus looked up and saw the valve Daniel was describing, positioned in an incredibly awkward spot. Reaching it would require him to basically do a backbend in the cramped tunnel, while simultaneously turning a stiff valve handle. I can do it, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. He positioned himself carefully, wedging his feet against one wall and his back against another, then reached up for the valve. His fingers barely touched it, and he realized with horror that he might be just slightly too short to reach it properly. But giving up wasn't an option, not when they were this close to success. Marcus stretched his arm as far as it would go, his fingertips grazing the valve handle but unable to grip it properly. Sweat dripped into his eyes, and his awkward position made his back muscles scream in protest. I'm almost there, just a few more inches, he grunted, willing his 8-year-old body to grow just a little bit taller. In the cockpit, Daniel watched the hydraulic pressure gauge continue its steady decline. Captain, we've got maybe 4 minutes left, he said quietly, not wanting Marcus to hear the desperation in his voice. Jennifer's knuckles were white on the control yoke as she fought to keep the plane level. Marcus, sweetheart, can you find something to stand on? Patricia suggested, her voice gentle but urgent. Maybe stack some of the toolboxes. Marcus looked around the cramped tunnel and spotted 2 small metal cases pushed against the wall. He grabbed them and positioned them under his feet, gaining precious inches of height. Standing on the unstable boxes in the shaking plane was terrifying, but now he could firmly grip the valve handle. I've got it, he announced triumphantly, wrapping both small hands around the handle. Okay, buddy, this is the big one, Daniel coached. Turn it counterclockwise 4 full rotations this time. Count them out for me. Marcus pulled with all his remaining strength, and to his relief, this valve turned smoothly from the start. 1 rotation, 2 rotations, 3 rotations, 4 rotations. The final turn clicked into place just as the plane hit another violent shake. Marcus lost his balance on the toolboxes and fell hard onto the metal floor of the compartment. The wind knocked out of him. For several terrifying seconds he couldn't breathe or speak, just lay there gasping like a fish out of water. Marcus, answer me right now. Patricia's voice was nearly screaming through the headset. Are you hurt? Can you move? Finally, Marcus managed to gulp in a breath of air, then another. I'm okay, he wheezed, though his whole body felt like one giant bruise. The valve is closed. All 4 rotations. In the cockpit, Daniel's eyes went wide as he watched his instrument panel. The hydraulic pressure had stopped dropping and was actually beginning to stabilize. Captain, it worked. We're maintaining pressure in System C. I'm getting responsive control feedback. Jennifer tested the controls carefully, feeling the plane respond to her inputs for the first time in nearly 20 minutes. Tears of relief streamed down her face as she realized they might actually survive this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Jennifer announced over the intercom, her voice thick with emotion. We have successfully contained the hydraulic failure and regained control of the aircraft. We will be making an emergency landing in Atlanta in approximately 30 minutes. I want you all to know that your lives were saved today by the bravest 8-year-old boy I have ever met. The cabin erupted in confused murmurs and questions, but Richard Thompson knew exactly who his captain was talking about. His son, the boy he barely paid attention to, had just saved his life, and everyone else's. Patricia opened the service compartment hatch and reached in to help Marcus crawl out. The boy emerged dirty, bruised, and exhausted, his clothes torn and his face smudged with grease and hydraulic fluid, but his eyes shone with accomplishment, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You did it, Marcus," Patricia said, pulling him into a tight hug. "You saved all of us." Marcus hugged her back, finally allowing himself to feel the fear he had been suppressing for the last 25 minutes. His small body shook with delayed shock and adrenaline crash. The moment Marcus stepped back into the main cabin, still being supported by Patricia, the passengers erupted into spontaneous applause. People were standing despite the seatbelt signs, clapping and crying and cheering for the small boy who looked confused by all the attention. An elderly man reached out to shake his hand. "Thank you, son. Thank you so much." A woman with a baby pressed a kiss to Marcus's forehead. "You saved my daughter's life. God bless you." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the sudden rush of gratitude and emotion from all these strangers, who minutes ago hadn't even known he existed. Then Marcus saw his father pushing through the crowd, and he braced himself for anger about disobeying orders to stay in his seat. But Richard Thompson dropped to his knees in the aisle and pulled his son into the tightest embrace of Marcus's life. "I'm so sorry," Richard whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I haven't been there for you. I'm so sorry I didn't see how amazing you are." Marcus felt his father's tears soaking into his hair, and realized with shock that Richard was crying, something Marcus had never seen in his entire life. "It's okay, Dad," Marcus said softly, hugging him back. "I just wanted to help." Richard pulled back and looked at his son, really looked at him, for the first time in years. He saw Catherine's eyes staring back at him, full of the same intelligence and kindness she had possessed. "Your mother would be so proud of you right now. I'm proud of you." Those words, which Marcus had longed to hear for so long, finally broke through his brave facade. He burst into tears, clinging to his father while the cabin full of grateful passengers gave them space for their moment. Sometimes the scariest situations reveal what truly matters, and Richard Thompson had just gotten the wake-up call of his lifetime. Jennifer's voice came over the intercom again, steadier now. "We will be landing at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport in 22 minutes. Emergency crews will be standing by as a precaution, but I want to assure you that we have stable control of the aircraft." The passengers settled back into their seats, many of them still wiping away tears of relief. Marcus sat between his father and the nanny, still shaking slightly from the adrenaline wearing off. Richard kept his arm around his son's shoulders, holding him close as if afraid to let go. "When we land, I'm canceling all my meetings," Richard said quietly. "We're extending our vacation. Just you and me, doing whatever you want to do." The 22 minutes to Atlanta felt both endless and too short. Marcus sat wrapped in a blanket Patricia had brought him, sipping apple juice and trying to process everything that had just happened. His whole body ached, and the bump on his head throbbed painfully, but he felt strangely peaceful. Around him, passengers kept turning to look at him with expressions of wonder and gratitude. A businessman 2 rows up kept mouthing, "Thank you," every time they made eye contact. A teenage girl had recorded a video of Marcus being hugged by his father, and was already posting it online with hashtags about child heroes. Captain Jennifer Walsh came on the intercom one more time as Atlanta's skyline appeared in the distance. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Atlanta. I want to personally thank each of you for your composure during this emergency. And to young Marcus Thompson, you have my eternal gratitude and respect." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "In my 22 years of flying, I have never encountered such bravery from someone so young. You reminded all of us today that heroes come in all sizes." More applause filled the cabin, and Marcus felt his face turning red with embarrassment and pride. The landing was surprisingly smooth considering what the plane had been through. As the wheels touched down on the runway, the entire cabin erupted in cheers and applause again. Through the windows, Marcus could see dozens of emergency vehicles lining the taxiway, their lights flashing in the afternoon sun. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars had all responded to the emergency call. The plane taxied to a remote area of the airport, away from the normal gates, where even more emergency personnel were waiting. "Dad, why are there so many people out there?" Marcus asked, pressing his face to the window. Richard smiled. "Because you're a hero, son. The whole world is going to want to hear your story." As the plane came to a complete stop, Patricia made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while emergency crews perform a safety inspection of the aircraft. Once we're cleared, you'll be able to deplane through the forward and rear exits. But before anyone could deplane, paramedics were allowed to board to check on Marcus. A kind woman with a medical bag knelt beside him. "Hi there, superhero. I'm Sarah, and I need to check you over to make sure you're okay after your adventure." Marcus allowed her to examine his bumps and bruises, answering her questions about whether anything hurt badly. "You've got some impressive battle scars," Sarah said with a smile, "but nothing that won't heal up just fine." Finally, the passengers were cleared to exit the aircraft. But as Marcus stood up to leave with his father, Captain Jennifer Walsh emerged from the cockpit. She walked straight to Marcus, removed her captain's wings pin from her uniform, and knelt down to his level. "Marcus, these wings represent everything I value most: courage, skill, and the determination to protect lives at any cost. Today you embodied all of those qualities better than most professional pilots I know." She pinned the wings carefully onto Marcus's torn shirt. "I would be honored if you would accept these as a token of my respect and gratitude." Marcus touched the wings with wonder, his eyes filling with tears again. "Thank you, Captain. I'll keep them forever." Jennifer hugged him tightly, whispering, "You saved my life today, kid. I'll never forget you." Stepping off the plane onto the tarmac, Marcus was greeted by a scene that looked like something from a movie. News cameras were set up behind barriers, reporters were shouting questions, and airport officials were waiting to greet them. Richard kept his hand protectively on Marcus's shoulder as they descended the stairs, both of them squinting in the bright Atlanta sunshine. The CEO of the airline, Thomas Bradford, stepped forward first. "Mr. Thompson, Marcus, on behalf of Atlantic Airways, I want to express our deepest gratitude for your actions today." He shook Marcus's hand formally, treating the 8-year-old with the respect of an equal. The paramedics insisted that Marcus be checked out at the hospital as a precaution, so an ambulance stood ready to transport him. But first, the other passengers wanted to say goodbye. One by one, people approached Marcus to hug him, thank him, and take photos with him. The elderly couple, who had sat holding hands during the crisis, pressed a St. Christopher medal into his palm. "For protection, dear boy, though you clearly have your own guardian angel watching over you." The young mother with the baby made Marcus hold her infant daughter. "When she's old enough to understand, I'm going to tell her that her life was saved by a real hero." Richard watched these interactions with a mixture of pride and shame. He realized that in 8 years of being a father, he had never really seen his son the way these strangers were seeing him now. While he had been building his empire and chasing his next billion, Marcus had been growing into someone extraordinary. "Mr. Thompson?" A reporter had somehow gotten close enough to shout a question. "How does it feel knowing your son saved 333 lives today?" Richard looked down at Marcus, who was still clutching the baby and looking overwhelmed. "It feels like I've been given a second chance," Richard answered honestly. "A chance to be the father my son deserves." The ambulance ride to the hospital was quiet. Marcus lay on the gurney while Richard sat beside him, holding his small hand. "Dad?" Marcus said softly. "Yeah, buddy," Richard responded, his voice gentle in a way it hadn't been in years. "When you were on your conference call before everything happened, were you closing the Thompson merger?" Marcus asked. Richard felt his heart clench with guilt. "Yes, I was." "Why?" Marcus was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because I almost died today, and I realized that even if I had, you probably wouldn't have noticed for a while. You would have been too busy with your call." The brutal honesty of that statement hit Richard like a physical blow. His son was right. If the plane had gone down, Richard would have died never having really known the remarkable child he had helped create. "Marcus, I need you to hear this," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "There is nothing in this world more important than you. Not my company, not my wealth, not my reputation, nothing." He squeezed Marcus's hand gently. "I lost your mother, and instead of holding you closer, I buried myself in work because it hurt less than feeling. But you deserved better than that. You deserved a father who saw you, really saw you, and I failed you. I'm so sorry." At the hospital, doctors examined Marcus thoroughly while Richard hovered nearby, refusing to leave his side even when nurses suggested he wait outside. The examinations revealed extensive bruising, a mild concussion, and strained muscles, but nothing requiring hospitalization. "Your son is one tough kid," the doctor told Richard with admiration. "Most adults wouldn't have held up as well as he did under that kind of physical and emotional stress. He should rest for a few days, ice the bruises, and take it easy. But he's going to be just fine. Richard felt relief wash over him like a wave. While Marcus was being bandaged and given pain medication, Richard's phone exploded with messages and calls. News of the incident had gone viral, and the video the teenage girl had posted of Marcus's reunion with his father already had millions of views. His assistant was frantically trying to reach him about media requests. His board members wanted statements. His investors wanted assurances. For the first time in his adult life, Richard ignored all of it. He turned off his phone completely and focused entirely on the small boy lying in the hospital bed, looking tiny and vulnerable in the oversized hospital gown. "Mr. Thompson?" A hospital administrator knocked politely on the door. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are over 40 media organizations in our lobby requesting interviews with Marcus. We also have calls from Good Morning America, The Today Show, CNN, and even the White House press office. How would you like us to handle this?" Richard looked at Marcus, who had fallen asleep from exhaustion and medication. "Tell them all that Marcus needs rest and privacy right now. No interviews, no photos, no statements. My son is not a media spectacle. He's a brave kid who needs to recover in peace." The administrator nodded and left. But within minutes, Richard could hear the sounds of arguments and negotiations happening in the hallway outside. He stood up and locked the door, then pulled a chair right next to Marcus's bed. He sat there watching his son sleep, really looking at him for what felt like the first time. Marcus had Catherine's nose and her long eyelashes. He had her kindness too, that instinct to help others even at personal cost. "I see you now," Richard whispered. "I finally see you, and I promise I'll never look away again." Marcus stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. "Dad, are you still here?" His voice was sleepy and confused, as if he expected to wake up alone. "I'm here, buddy. I'm not going anywhere," Richard assured him, taking his hand again. Marcus smiled, a genuine happy smile that Richard hadn't seen directed at him in far too long. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Richard nodded. "Anything, son?" Marcus took a breath. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me?" Richard felt tears burning in his eyes. "Marcus, your mother is watching from heaven right now and she is bursting with pride, just like I am. You're the best thing I've ever done in my life." The next morning, Marcus was discharged from the hospital with strict orders to rest. Richard had arranged for them to stay at the Four Seasons in downtown Atlanta, rather than continuing to Miami immediately. As they pulled up to the hotel, they found it surrounded by news vans and reporters. "This is insane," Richard muttered, seeing the chaos. The hotel manager had anticipated the problem and arranged for them to enter through a private service entrance. They were escorted to a penthouse suite with round-the-clock security to ensure their privacy. Once settled in the suite, Marcus gravitated immediately to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta's skyline. "It's pretty," he said simply, pressing his hand against the glass. Richard came to stand beside him, and they looked out at the city together in comfortable silence. "Marcus, I've been thinking," Richard began carefully. "I want to make some changes in my life. Big changes. I'm going to step back from day-to-day operations at Thompson Technologies and hire a proper CEO. I'll stay on as chairman, but that's a much less demanding role." Marcus turned to look at his father with surprise. "Really? But you love your company." "I love you more," Richard said simply. "And I've wasted 3 years that I can never get back. I don't want to waste any more time missing your childhood while I build empires that don't matter nearly as much as being your dad." Marcus's eyes filled with tears, and he hugged his father tightly. "I'd like that, Dad. I'd really like that." They stood there holding each other while Atlanta bustled below them. Two people who had almost lost everything learning to be a family again. The irony wasn't lost on Richard that it had taken a near-death experience to show him what truly mattered in life. A knock at the door interrupted their moment. "Mr. Thompson?" "Sir, there's a call I think you'll want to take. It's the President of the United States." Richard's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He picked up the phone while Marcus watched with wide eyes. "Mr. President, this is Richard Thompson." Marcus couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he watched his father's expressions shift from surprise to gratitude. "Yes, sir, he's right here, actually. Would you like to speak with him?" "Of course, one moment, please." Richard held out the phone to Marcus. "Buddy, the President wants to talk to you." Marcus took the phone with shaking hands. Hello?" His voice cracked nervously. Whatever the President said made Marcus's eyes go wide with wonder. "Really? The White House, when?" He listened intently. nodding even though the president couldn't see him. "Yes, sir. I'd be honored. Thank you so much, Mr. President." He handed the phone back to Richard, his face glowing with excitement. "Dad, the president wants to give me the Presidential Citizens Medal. He said I'm going to be the youngest person ever to receive it." Richard pulled his son into another hug, his heart swelling with pride. "That's incredible, Marcus. You absolutely deserve it." The rest of the day was a whirlwind of phone calls and arrangements. Richard's assistant coordinated with the White House about the ceremony. The airline sent over boxes of gifts and letters from grateful passengers. Flowers and cards arrived by the dozen. The following days in Atlanta were surreal for Marcus. The hotel suite became a sanctuary from the media frenzy outside. But inside, father and son were building something they had never really had before. A genuine relationship. They ordered room service and ate together without Richard checking his phone once. They watched movies late into the night, something Marcus couldn't remember ever doing with his dad. Richard asked questions about Marcus's interests, his favorite subjects in school, his dreams for the future. And for the first time, he actually listened to the answers with his full attention. "Dad, can I show you something?" Marcus asked on their third morning in Atlanta. He pulled out his tablet and opened a folder full of airplane design sketches he had made over the past year. Page after page showed detailed drawings of aircraft modifications, safety improvements, and innovative cockpit designs. "I've been designing these for a while. I thought maybe when I grow up, I could help make planes safer so what happened to us doesn't happen to other people." Richard looked through the sketches with growing amazement at the technical sophistication and creative thinking his 8-year-old son was demonstrating. Some of these ideas were actually brilliant. "Marcus, these are incredible," Richard said honestly, studying a particularly clever redesign of emergency hydraulic systems. "Have you shown these to anyone else?" Marcus shook his head. "I didn't think anyone would care. You were always too busy and the nanny just tells me to play video games when I try to show her stuff." The casual way Marcus said it broke Richard's heart all over again. How many other talents and interests had his son been hiding because nobody was paying attention? "From now on, I care," Richard promised, "about all of it. Your designs, your ideas, your dreams, everything. You're the most important project I'll ever work on." The conversation was interrupted by Richard's assistant, calling with news that couldn't wait. "Sir, I know you said no media, but this is different. Captain Jennifer Walsh, the pilot from Flight 747, is downstairs asking if she can visit Marcus. She brought someone with her." Richard looked at Marcus, who nodded enthusiastically. "Send them up, please." 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Richard opened it to find Captain Walsh standing beside a man in a flight engineer's uniform. "Mr. Thompson, Marcus, this is David Chen. He's the chief engineer for Atlantic Airways, and after hearing what Marcus did, he had to meet him." David stepped forward and shook Marcus's hand with genuine respect. "Son, I've been designing aircraft systems for 30 years, and what you diagnosed and fixed in that service compartment would have challenged most of my experienced engineers. Captain Walsh told me you identified a cascading hydraulic failure and isolated it, using manual overrides that most pilots don't even know exist." He pulled out a folder full of official-looking documents. "I've been reviewing your actions with our safety team, and we estimate that without your intervention, Flight 747 would have crashed approximately 4 minutes after you closed that final valve. You didn't just save lives, Marcus. You performed one of the most remarkable acts of crisis aviation maintenance in commercial flight history. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something in the comments. Would you have the courage to do what Marcus did? Share your opinion in the comments because Marcus's bravery is inspiring people around the world right now." Jennifer Walsh sat down with Marcus and pulled out her own tablet, showing him detailed reports about what had happened on the flight. "The FAA has been investigating, and they discovered that the hydraulic line had a manufacturing defect that went undetected during routine inspections. The crack you spotted would have eventually failed anyway, but the storm accelerated the damage." She scrolled through technical diagrams that Marcus studied with intense interest. "Because of your quick thinking and technical knowledge, the FAA is now implementing new inspection protocols for all Boeing 767 aircraft. You've literally changed aviation safety standards, Marcus." David Chen opened his briefcase and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. "Marcus, I want you to have this. It's a model of a Boeing 767, but this isn't just any model." He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a detailed replica with a small plaque at the base. "This is the exact model of your aircraft. tail number N4778, and I had our team customize it with your name and the date. This plane will fly for many more years because of you, and I wanted you to have something to remember that you're forever part of its history." Marcus accepted the model with reverence, turning it carefully in his hands. "There's something else," Jennifer said, glancing at Richard. "Mr. Thompson, Atlantic Airways would like to offer Marcus something very special. We want to create a scholarship program in his name for young people interested in aviation and engineering. We're calling it the Marcus Thompson Future Aviator Scholarship, and it will provide full funding for college education to 50 students every year." She smiled at Marcus's shocked expression. "Your bravery is going to help hundreds of kids pursue their dreams of flying, just like you saved 333 people. Your impact is going to ripple forward for generations." Marcus looked at his father, overwhelmed by everything happening. Richard put his arm around his son's shoulders. "That's incredibly generous, Captain Walsh, Mr. Chen." Marcus would be honored. But then Richard had an idea of his own. "Actually, I'd like to add something to that. Thompson Technologies will match your scholarship fund and provide additional grants for aviation safety research. And Marcus is going to be involved in selecting the scholarship recipients every year, aren't you, buddy?" Marcus nodded, his eyes shining with excitement and pride. "I want to help other kids who love airplanes as much as I do." David Chen stood up and did something unexpected. He saluted Marcus formally, the way military personnel salute superior officers. "Marcus Thompson, you exemplify everything we hope to instill in the next generation of aviation professionals: technical excellence, courage under pressure, and an unwavering commitment to safety. It has been my honor to meet you." Jennifer stood and saluted as well, followed by Richard, who saluted his son for the first time in his life. Marcus, not sure what else to do, saluted back, his small hand trembling slightly as tears rolled down his cheeks. In that moment, he wasn't just an 8-year-old boy anymore. He was a hero who had earned the respect of professionals at the top of their fields. After Jennifer and David left, Marcus and Richard sat together on the balcony watching the sunset paint Atlanta's sky in shades of orange and pink. "Dad, can I ask you something serious?" Marcus said quietly. Richard turned his full attention to his son. "Of course, anything." Marcus fidgeted with the airplane pendant around his neck before speaking. "When I was in that service compartment, I was really scared. I kept thinking about Mom and how I might see her soon if the plane crashed. Part of me wanted to just stop trying and let it happen so I wouldn't be scared anymore." Richard felt his throat tighten with emotion as he listened to his son's confession. "But what made you keep going?" Marcus looked up at his father with those wise green eyes. "I thought about all the people on the plane who had families waiting for them. I thought about that mom with the baby and the old couple holding hands, and even you. I realized that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you're terrified because other people need you." He paused. "Mom used to tell me that small people can do big things. I finally understand what she meant." "Your mother was right," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. "And Marcus, I need you to know something important. What you felt in that compartment, that fear and that temptation to give up, that's what makes what you did even more heroic. Anyone can be brave when they're not afraid. True courage is acting despite the fear." He pulled Marcus close. "And son, I was wrong about so many things. I thought building a billion-dollar company made me important, but you showed me that real importance comes from who you are, not what you own. You're a better person at 8 than I am at 42. Marcus leaned against his father's shoulder, feeling safer and more loved than he had in 3 years. "I'm glad the plane didn't crash, Dad. Not just because everyone survived, but because it brought you back to me. I missed you so much after Mom died, but it felt like you died too, just in a different way." Richard felt tears streaming down his face, not caring anymore about maintaining his controlled businessman facade. "I'm here now, Marcus. Really here. And I'm never leaving again. I promise you that, on your mother's memory." They sat together in silence for a while, father and son, watching the day turn to night over Atlanta. Below them, the city lights began twinkling like earthbound stars. Inside the hotel suite, Marcus's phone kept buzzing with messages from well-wishers around the world, but neither of them moved to check it. Some moments are too important to interrupt. "Dad?" Marcus said eventually. "Yeah, buddy," Richard responded. "I think Mom would be happy that you're back. She always said you were a good man who just needed to remember what mattered most." Richard kissed the top of his son's head. "Your mom was the smartest person I ever knew. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the East Room of the White House wearing a new suit that Richard had taken him shopping for together. The room was filled with dignitaries, members of Congress, military officials, and aviation industry leaders. Captain Jennifer Walsh sat in the front row next to Daniel Martinez and Patricia Morrison, all three of them wearing their dress uniforms. David Chen was there representing Atlantic Airways. And scattered throughout the audience were dozens of passengers from Flight 747, ordinary people who had rearranged their lives to witness this moment. They wore ribbons in their lapels, blue and gold, the colors Marcus had chosen for his scholarship program. The President of the United States stepped up to the podium and the room fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today to honor extraordinary courage displayed by an extraordinary young American. On the afternoon of September 17th, 333 people boarded a routine flight from Seattle to Miami. They expected nothing more than a few hours of travel, perhaps a movie and a snack. What they got instead was a life-or-death crisis that would have ended in tragedy, if not for the actions of one remarkable 8-year-old boy. The president paused, letting his words sink in. "Marcus Thompson, would you please join me?" Marcus walked forward on slightly shaky legs, very aware of the hundreds of eyes watching him. Richard gave him an encouraging smile from his seat in the front row, and Marcus drew strength from his father's presence. The president put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Marcus, at an age when most children are worried about homework and video games, you diagnosed a catastrophic mechanical failure, crawled into a dangerous service compartment, and manually isolated a hydraulic leak that was causing your aircraft to fail. You did this while injured, while frightened, and while your aircraft was actively losing altitude. Aviation experts have reviewed your actions and concluded that you performed at a level that would challenge experienced aircraft engineers." The president picked up a blue box from the podium and opened it, revealing the Presidential Citizens Medal on its distinctive ribbon. This medal is awarded to citizens who have performed exemplary deeds of service for their country or their fellow citizens. Marcus, you embodied the best of American spirit, the courage to act, the wisdom to think clearly under pressure, and the selflessness to risk everything for others. You are the youngest person in history to receive this honor, and I cannot think of anyone who deserves it more. He pinned the medal carefully to Marcus's suit jacket. "On behalf of a grateful nation, thank you for your service and your bravery." The room erupted in applause, a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Marcus stood there overwhelmed, tears running down his face, as 333 reasons for his actions stood and clapped. The woman with the baby was there, her daughter now wearing a tiny onesie that said, "Marcus Thompson saved my life." The elderly couple stood hand in hand crying openly. Even hardened military generals had tears in their eyes. This wasn't just about one boy's heroism. It was about what that heroism represented, the potential for greatness that exists in every person regardless of age, the importance of preparation meeting opportunity, and the profound truth that heroes are made in moments of impossible choice. After the ceremony, there was a reception where Marcus was introduced to dozens of important people whose names and titles blurred together in his mind. Senators wanted photos with him. The Secretary of Transportation presented him with a special FAA commendation. The CEO of Boeing thanked him personally and mentioned that their engineers were studying his actions for training purposes. But the moment that meant the most came when the passengers from Flight 747 formed a line to speak with him one more time. Each person shared what they had been flying to Miami for that day, what moments they would have missed if Marcus hadn't saved them. The businessman who had kept thanking him on the plane introduced himself as Gregory Palmer. "Marcus, I was flying to Miami to see my daughter perform in her first ballet recital. Because of you, I didn't miss it. She's 12 now and just got accepted to Juilliard. I would have missed everything if not for your bravery." He handed Marcus a photo of a young girl in a ballet costume, smiling triumphantly. "She wanted you to have this. She says you're her hero." Marcus accepted the photo carefully, adding it to the growing collection of mementos people had given him. The young mother approached with her baby, who was now 3 weeks older and much more alert. "Marcus, this is Emma. She's alive because you were brave. When she's old enough to understand, I'm going to tell her this story, and I'm going to teach her that real heroes look like you, smart, kind, and willing to help others even when it's scary." She pressed something into Marcus's hand. It was a silver bracelet engraved with the date of the flight and the words "Emma's guardian angel." "I had this made for you. Please wear it, and remember that you gave my daughter her entire life. Every birthday she celebrates, every milestone she reaches, every moment of joy she experiences exists because of you. Marcus looked around at all these people, each one representing a life saved, a future preserved, a story that could continue because he had been brave. It was overwhelming in the most beautiful way. An older woman who had been sitting near the back of the plane approached him last. "Young man, I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a pediatric oncologist, and I was flying to Miami to perform a surgery on a 6-year-old girl with a brain tumor. Because you saved that flight, I was able to perform that surgery the next day. The little girl is cancer-free now and doing wonderfully." She showed Marcus a photo of a smiling child with no hair but eyes full of life. "You didn't just save 333 people that day, Marcus. You saved all the lives those 333 people would go on to touch." Marcus had never thought about it that way. His actions had created a ripple effect of preserved futures and continued impact that would extend far beyond anything he could measure. Dr. Mitchell knelt down to his level. "I've spent my career saving children's lives, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that what you did required a kind of courage most adults never find. You should be very proud of yourself." Marcus looked over at his father, who was watching this exchange with obvious emotion. "My dad says being brave means doing what's right even when you're scared," Marcus said. "I was really scared, but I knew everyone was counting on me." Dr. Mitchell smiled. "That, young man, is the very definition of heroism." The months following the White House ceremony brought changes to Marcus's life that were both exciting and challenging. His story had gone viral worldwide, and he became an unexpected symbol of youth empowerment and heroism. Schools invited him to speak. Aviation companies wanted him to consult on safety designs. Media outlets competed for interviews. But Richard carefully managed all of it, ensuring that his son's childhood wasn't completely consumed by fame. "You're a hero, but you're also still a kid," Richard reminded him often. "You need time to just be 8 years old." True to his word, Richard had restructured his entire life around being present for Marcus. He hired a new CEO for Thompson Technologies and moved his office to their home so he could work remotely most days. He coached Marcus's soccer team even though he knew nothing about soccer and had to watch YouTube videos to learn. He attended every school event, helped with homework every night, and most importantly, he listened when Marcus wanted to talk about anything from airplanes to video games to missing his mother. The relationship they were building wasn't perfect, but it was real and growing stronger every day. The Marcus Thompson Future Aviators Scholarship Program launched with tremendous success, receiving over 5,000 applications for its first 50 spots. Marcus participated in the selection process, reading personal essays from kids all over America who shared his passion for aviation. "Dad, look at this one," Marcus said one evening, showing Richard an essay from a 12-year-old girl from rural Montana who had built her own wind tunnel to test airplane designs. "She reminds me of me. We have to pick her." Richard smiled, proud of his son's generous spirit and commitment to helping others pursue their dreams. Marcus also began working with David Chen and the Atlantic Airways engineering team as a junior consultant on aviation safety projects. They took his childhood enthusiasm seriously, valuing his unique perspective and creative problem-solving approaches. "Marcus sees problems differently than adults do," David explained to his team. "He doesn't know what's supposed to be impossible, so he imagines solutions we would never consider." Together, they developed 3 new safety innovations that Atlantic Airways implemented across their entire fleet. Marcus's designs were crude and required significant refinement, but the core ideas were brilliant. At just 8 years old, he was making real contributions to aviation safety. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in Marcus himself. The boy who had once felt invisible and unimportant now understood his own worth and potential. He walked taller, spoke more confidently, and engaged with the world more openly. The trauma of that terrifying flight had been real, and he still had occasional nightmares about being trapped in dark spaces. But therapy was helping him process those fears. And more importantly, he had his father truly present in his life for the first time since his mother died. "Dad," Marcus said one night before bed, "I think I'm happy again, like really happy. Is that okay?" Richard pulled his son into a hug. "It's more than okay, buddy. Your mom would want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. You deserve all the happiness in the world." A year after the incident, Atlantic Airways invited Marcus and Richard to attend a special ceremony at SeaTac International Airport in Seattle. They arrived to find a Boeing 767 parked on the tarmac, but not just any 767. It was tail number N4778, the actual plane Marcus had saved, now sporting a special paint scheme. Along the fuselage, in elegant lettering, were painted the names of all 333 passengers and crew members who had been on board that day, and near the nose, larger than the rest, was written, "The Marcus Thompson, saved by courage, flying with gratitude." Captain Jennifer Walsh met them at the base of the boarding stairs. She had been promoted to chief pilot for Atlantic Airways, but had specifically requested to command this special flight. "Marcus, Mr. Thompson, welcome back. We've completely overhauled this aircraft with enhanced safety systems, many of which were inspired by your suggestions, Marcus. She's the safest plane in our fleet now, and we want you to be part of her return to service." She gestured toward the stairs. "Would you like to come aboard?" Marcus hesitated, feeling a flutter of anxiety about getting back on the plane where he had faced such terror. Richard squeezed his shoulder. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready, son." But Marcus thought about all those names painted on the fuselage, all those lives that had continued because he had been brave. He took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready." Walking through the cabin was surreal. The plane had been completely refurbished, but Marcus could still identify his old seat, 12A. Sitting in that seat now was a large framed photograph of Marcus in his suit at the White House, holding his Presidential Citizen's Medal. "Every passenger who flies on this aircraft will see your photo and read your story," Jennifer explained. "You're part of this plane's legacy forever." Marcus touched the frame gently, remembering the terrified 8-year-old boy who had sat in this very seat not knowing his world was about to change completely. "Hi, past me," he whispered. "I just want you to know that everything turns out okay. Better than okay, actually." The special flight that day carried a unique passenger manifest. All available survivors from the original Flight 747 who wanted to be part of the plane's return to service. As Marcus walked through the cabin, he saw familiar faces. Gregory Palmer was there with his daughter, the ballet dancer. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was there, along with the 6-year-old cancer survivor she had saved. The elderly couple held hands in their seats, wearing matching shirts that said "Saved by Marcus." Emma's mother had brought her baby, now a toddler taking her first flight. Even the businessmen from first class had returned, and they stood to applaud when Marcus passed by. "To Marcus!" someone shouted, and the entire cabin erupted in cheers. Captain Walsh invited Marcus to sit in the cockpit jump seat for takeoff, the traditional place of honor for special guests. As the plane began its takeoff roll, Marcus felt the familiar acceleration and then that magical moment when the wheels left the ground and they were flying. He looked out the cockpit window at Seattle disappearing below them and felt a profound sense of peace. This plane that had almost become his tomb was now a testament to survival, courage, and the incredible things that happen when ordinary people do extraordinary things. "Thank you, Marcus," Jennifer said over her shoulder as they climbed through the clouds. "For everything." Marcus smiled, touching his mother's airplane pendant. "Thank you for letting me help," he responded. "Thank you for believing that someone my size could make a difference." Jennifer laughed. "Kid, you didn't just make a difference, you changed the world." 5 years later, Marcus Thompson stood at the National Aviation Hall of Fame, now 13 years old and confident. The scared 8-year-old had become a young man who designed safety innovations and mentored students through his scholarship program. His father Richard sat in the front row, having sold his company to devote himself full-time to being present for his son. He finally understood that his greatest legacy wasn't a fortune, but the remarkable young man Marcus was becoming. Being a hero isn't about being fearless, Marcus told the audience of pilots, engineers, and survivors. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway because other people are counting on you. The 333 passengers he saved had gone on to live years of life that wouldn't have existed without his courage. As Marcus hugged his father after the speech, he whispered, "We made it, Dad." Richard held him tight. "Your mom would be so proud of who you've become. So if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Leave a comment telling me, would you have the courage to act in an impossible situation? Marcus chose bravery when it mattered most and saved 333 lives. Your moment might be coming sooner than you think. Will you be ready? Thanks for watching, and remember, you're more capable than you know and braver than you believe. Until next time, keep being the hero someone needs you to be.